Hi, welcome to Family Transition Place's International Women's Day event. I'm Nora Kennedy. We are really glad that you're here with us today because today's event is going to be just a little bit different than what you might be used to. There's no guest speaker today. Instead, we are going to bring you the stories of 6 remarkable women from our community. Women who, over the past 35 years of Family Transition Place's existence in our community, have blazed trails, challenged the status quo, and have moved gender equity forward. So now I invite you to sit back, to relax, and let yourself be inspired. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Nora.
You know, when we first started tossing the idea around about this project for International Women's Day, you were the very first person I thought of. Because you were a teacher, is that right?
Yes.
And then while you were still teaching, you made the decision to run for municipal politics. So what drove you to that?
Well, I think it was because I was on with a wonderful group of teachers at school who were very much feminists in the age before that was even a word that was used. And they were concerned that the new council didn't seem to have anybody that was running that was a woman. So I ran in the election and I was the only woman elected.
So what was that like for you running in that campaign?
Well, the first thing you learn, which wasn't even a word in my vocabulary, was misogynist. And I was very upset going door to door and finding that mostly elderly people would say to me, it's a man's job, you shouldn't even be running. So when you get used to that, then you're sort of more determined than ever. It wasn't too bad on election night for when I was running for council. It became much more difficult when I ran for mayor, because this was the first time a woman had run for mayor, and it was received with a lot of skepticism and a lot of misogyny, even more so. One of the candidates said to me that it takes balls to be a mayor and that I would never therefore be elected, and that I was welcome to come to his victory party. And on the night itself, this gentleman said to his wife, when the results started to come in and I was not in the top numbers in the first 2, we've got the bitch now.
Oh, nice.
And so eventually when I was elected and my husband was still there, he said to him, who's got the bitch now? So we had a wonderful team. It was the first time there were 4 women on council when I was elected as mayor.
So that was a really big shift.
Absolutely huge. From one woman to being with 3 other women who were so like-minded and who were really looking to do things for the town. I mean, Jennifer Walmsley took on my dream of having a theatre and she ran with the whole idea of Theatre Orangeville. Janice Gooding took up the mantle and went with the farmers market, which is successful even today. Anne Bush was on council with me, and when we started the whole thing about having transit and having a bus, that was her thing, the reason she wanted to be on council. These women had definite things that they wanted to do and to accomplish, and the things that we envisioned together and worked on. And the wonderful thing was to be able to say to these women, go ahead, run with this, because I know you can do it. I have been so lucky to have had groups of women who not only were my mentors, but they were my support group. And there was no jealousy, no envy, no whatever. They certainly didn't want to be on council themselves, but they were there all the time whenever anything was needed. They were out running door to door for me during elections. Just an amazing group of women. And I honestly feel that women need a group of women behind them.
So what advice would you give to young women that you would like to support now going forward?
Well, if you're passionate about something, everything's possible. If you really feel that you've got something to offer and you've got something that would be to the betterment of your community, not to the detriment, that you can get out there and with your group of women behind you, you can achieve anything.
So you could have knocked me over with a feather, Jessie, the other morning when we were sitting around the table at our management team meeting, and I was explaining the concept of this project and explained who the women in the community were that we were going to be looking for to participate. And you, sitting in your accustomed place right there to my left, said, well, I could do it.
What's interesting is Family Transition Place is celebrating the 35 years, and this April it will be 35 years since I graduated from university. my Bachelor of Science with a major in computer science. And at that time, I have to say, there weren't a lot of women in my classes.
So by the time that you finished and graduated, you were a bit of a rare breed, an anomaly in that whole program.
Yes, a bit of an anomaly. My first interview while I was still on campus, just about to graduate, was with a major Canadian technological company. And having the name Jessie, I think, might have thrown them off a little bit, because when I showed up for my interview, the gentleman interviewing me looked a bit surprised to see me, and then proceeded to ask me if I planned on getting married and having children. I never heard back from them. And I applied at a major telecommunications company. Drove the 4 hours to the interview, walked in and had the gentleman interviewing look up and go, "Oh, I didn't know you were a woman. The last person we hired was a woman and she got pregnant and left. I'm not hiring another woman, but I have to interview you now that you're here."
What kind of impact does that have on a young woman at that point in her life trying to prove herself and make her way in the world?
I was mad at him, and I was mad that that was allowed to happen. But it made me just want to prove even more that it was their loss that they didn't get me. I was transferred from one organization to another, our division, full division transferred. And I remember getting my offer of employment. And when I looked at it, and we confirmed the figures were right, just by transferring to another organization, I got approximately a $10,000 annual raise.
$10,000?
$10,000. I had been underpaid compared to my male peers. It validated my self-worth.
Absolutely.
It really, I grew a couple inches that day.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I was working at one point, we were sitting in a room and I'm looking around. It was myself and 17 men in the division. It never dawned on me that it was non-traditional.
So you didn't feel yourself like you were a pioneer or a trailblazer?
No, I was just doing what I wanted to do, and there were other people around me, but I really didn't focus on them.
But your work environment now is very different from what it was back in the day when it was just Jessie and 17, however many men, because you work at Family Transition Place.
Yes, I do. So I came from a male-dominated business world to a female-dominated social work world, where I was the anomaly in the male-dominated field, working in technology because I was female. Now I'm the anomaly because I'm the Sheldon, the technical person working with social workers.
So if you had a piece of advice to give to a young woman with the same sort of drive and Sheldon-like qualities that you have, Jessie, getting started, what would you say to her?
Do what makes you happy. Have your own self-worth internal, and take your own self-respect and self-worth out there into the world, and don't let anyone tarnish your light.
Hi, Mandy.
Hello.
Welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to be part of our adventure today. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me. I'm really honored to represent the women across our county and within Caledon. Dufferin. It's pretty awesome.
So you're a firefighter.
Yes, that's correct. I am a career firefighter, so I work for the City of Brampton full-time. That pays my bills. And then when I come home, I serve the community in which I live. So I volunteer in the community of Inglewood and Caledon, and I'm the district chief out of that station.
What was it like joining up, getting that full-time job and walking in the first day?
It's exciting, it's nerve-wracking. You're brand new in a position where you have this vision of what it's going to be, and you honestly have no idea until you run that first call. I think we all have this vision of firefighters or emergency service as these people that are going to show up and solve all our problems. And you know, you ride this big fire truck and the lights are going and you wear some cool gear. You think that,
cool.
Yeah, that's what our perception is. But we see and hear things that most people don't, that are very challenging on your mind and body. And that's the part that people don't see or don't understand. So going in as, 21 years old and having this vision of what firefighting was going to be. And it's definitely nerve-wracking for sure.
How accepted did you feel from the other men?
Honestly, Brampton was amazing. I never once felt like I was an outsider, that what I look like or my gender played a role on how I was going to succeed within the department. I never really understood that concept until I went to a women's only conference specifically in firefighting and heard some of the stories and horror stories of experiences other females felt in our industry. And it was really an eye-opener to say that I was very thankful and humbled by how I was treated coming into the department. Now you see so many more females on the job, and it's amazing to see. It just puts a smile on your face to say, like, we can do anything that we put our minds to.
Do you think when you go out to a call that the people who are that are waiting for you when you show up care whether you're a woman or a man?
Absolutely not. If there's a fire, we're fully dressed head to toe. The only thing you could probably see are my eyes. So they do not care who is coming. They just know somebody's coming to help them. And at the worst time of your life, or you're calling 911 and thinking this is, the very worst day of my life, they don't care who's coming. They just know that a professional's showing up at their door to help them. I'm not going to say it's never scary, because you go into situations and you have no idea what you're walking into. I think that's why this job brings a lot of people, is because it's exciting. It's something new every day. It's pretty fun from that perspective. I love my job.
Yeah, I can see that just in your face. You just talk about it and you look like you're just...
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely do. I would definitely encourage other women, encourage other men. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It's an amazing job. It's very rewarding.
Have you ever had somebody be completely surprised when you take off the gear and there you are?
Yeah, it's a pretty fun feeling, because you can see it on their face and like, oh my gosh, like those are girls up there. Girls? Yeah, it definitely feels good, and knowing that we're even changing the face of an older generation too, right? It's even the young kids too. We end up doing a lot of school tours, and when they see a female get off out of the front seat, like, that's a pretty prestigious spot to sit in the truck, and knowing that there's somebody leading a pack and it's a female up there. So for them to see a female in this role or in this profession is definitely an eye-opener, to know that this is a potential or an option for them.
Yeah, that's opening up doors and windows and everything else for a whole new generation of girls.
For sure.
Hello, Karina.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. I know that you were a rhythmic gymnast, and from there you went on into coaching, but maybe you could tell me a little bit about how that all came to be.
My parents are from Finland, and rhythmic gymnastics is extremely popular there. And I started rhythmic gymnastics when I was 3. Had gone to university for kinesiology and wanted to be an athletic coach, which is what I did. I worked at the High Performance Training Center in Toronto and worked with world and Olympic athletes. Performed in 1976 at the Olympic Games in Montreal when it was a demonstration sport, because you always have to have a demonstration sport before it gets accepted. Was then the youngest president of a national sport governing body in 1980, when we were lobbying for inclusion of the sport, and the sport got included into the Olympic tableau. In 1984, I was doing commentary for CBC Sports, and Lori Fung won the gold medal, first ever in the sport.
What a high. That must have been incredible.
It was. First ever gold medal in our sport ever, because it was the first time it was in the Olympic Games. I had coached Lori, but I wasn't the coach on the floor because I was doing broadcasting for CBC. We had quite an interesting time because we weren't expected to win the gold medal. Basketball was on live, and when we won, everything was finished and we were being congratulated. It was wonderful, but my producer came on to my headphones and said, "We're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1," and I had a blank screen in front of me. And when you're commentating, you need to know the routine sort of backwards and inside out. So I commentated it with a blank screen in front of me. So one of the highlights that I don't even know how it happened.
How on earth did you manage that? How did you do that?
Well, the producer was talking in my ear, and I
Yeah.
knew where she was on the floor, and I knew the routine a million zillion times.
guess.
So I did see the tape afterwards, and I was quite pleasantly surprised that it actually worked.
So you weren't saying things like you were talking about a move that had already happened 10 seconds
Yeah,
ago.
no,
It was, or hadn't
was
happened yet.
happening, yeah.
It was happening.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm fascinated, actually. What is the connection between coaching elite athletes and business coaching?
Somewhere along the line, someone said, what you do for athletes, business could really use. It's really coaching individuals. A lot of the work that I do in facilitation and strategic planning is getting diverse groups to be able to come to consensus and to work together. And that's really just looking at each individual and trying to bring out the best in them. So I didn't find it that different than dealing with athletes.
Ever bump your head against the glass ceiling?
No.
Really? No. And what do you attribute that to?
I've never had a job. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've always run my own business. Yeah. So I do think that perhaps had I been in a job,
in a
corporation, which would have very different kinds of rules that I just didn't experience. So I'm not minimizing the fact that exists.
No, absolutely.
That exists.
Yeah.
I'm just really fortunate that I haven't encountered it, and I think it's probably a large part because I've carved my own path and chosen those ways and haven't been confined by any kind of bureaucratic or structural issues that other people have experienced.
Hi, Priya.
Hi, Nora.
I am so glad that you are able to join us today. Thank you so much for offering to be here to talk to us for this project for International Women's Day. As you know, we're talking to women from our community who have, as I put it, challenged the status quo a little, and I couldn't think of anybody more fitting for that description than you, Priya.
Thank you. I'm one of those women who thrive in crisis. I thrive with challenge. So what I tend to do is actually throw myself into those sorts of roles, really to push my own boundaries.
What do you think has created that need for you or that drive in you to challenge yourself like that so constantly?
I come from the caste of warriors. So
Oh, really?
I feel for me that it's in my blood. Like, I don't think there's any other way that I can possibly be.
So there's no fight that you've just walked away from?
Yeah, I don't think there ever has been one. And I was an amateur boxer as well, so I really
You really
yes.
embraced that.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's not easy. There have been moments where I felt crushed, and there's probably still moments that I could admit to where I do feel that sense of defeat. I am a survivor of sexual violence, of incest, as well as another experience of rape. The accused person in my case was acquitted. So that really made things very difficult for my family.
Yeah. How hard was that for you to hear?
I can tell you at this point, I was shocked. I didn't speak for a week. What do I say?
Yeah.
It was disappointing.
Where did you get your strength from?
I think there's so many different sources, and I think it kind of changes over time. My daughters are an incredible source of strength, and I sometimes don't think they know they are, but I want them to know that they are.
Are they warriors too?
Oh yes, fierce.
Fierce?
Yes, I think far more than I am.
You mentioned that it was 30 years ago when you first sort of connected with the justice system.
Yes.
What was that experience like for you at that point in time?
I went to court where a lot of people in the South Asian community were supporting the accused person. And so I had a courtroom full of men, and particularly South Asian men with power and influence, who sat and heard my testimony. You know, it was just, and I was only 16, 15 at the time. I gave testimony, probably about 6 hours worth over 2 days, cross-examination standing. There was no seat that was offered at that point.
How much of that experience do you think had influence on your career path? Because it seems almost full circle, right? You had that difficult experience so young, and yet, as you say, here you are working basically in the same ministry that you initially had that struggle with.
Yes, it's had a huge influence on me in terms of the kind of work that I chose to do. So powerful in terms of my own healing journey, to recognize that I can work with, you know, people who have committed sort of the same sort of crime that was committed against me, and being able to find the compassion and the empathy to help people, because that's what it was all about for me. I didn't go in to this kind of work thinking, oh, like I'm gonna change the world, or, you know, have this ideal that I'll be able to change the whole system. But I certainly know that I've made a difference in people's lives. That's when I knew in my healing that I moved from survivor to thriver, because I knew that I could do that work and do it well.
Hello.
Hey, Nora.
Thank
How
you
are
so much, Leah, for being able to do this for us.
I appreciate you asking me to be here.
It's
Thank you.
exciting. Thank you. You are the Deputy Chief of Police of the Orangeville Police Services currently, and it sounds like you've had quite a long history of policing.
My father was a police officer. My brother-in-law was a police officer. So I grew up with, you know, all the war stories, you know, at the kitchen table. And I really didn't see any difference being a woman and wanting to be a police officer. I was the first class that actually had the same uniform as the rest of the men. Before that, the women got different hats, they got different guns, they had different uniforms.
Really?
Yeah. So for me, you know, having the same forage cap as the rest of the guys was a step forward for women. At one time, policing was mostly, you know, men that were big and burly.
Right.
They were strong and brute, and had a lot of brute strength. And, you know, I came along, I was 5'4", 119 pounds, you know, and actually one guy turned and looked at me and goes, I don't think she can take a punch. So, you know, I had to prove that I could use my brains and my wit in order to get me out of situations instead of, you know, having to resort to violence or excessive force or force. At the beginning of your shift, you would do roll call. He'd say, you know, Guilfoyle, you're going to work on this car. And he says, this other person's name, you're going to work on this car, you're with Guilfoyle. And right away he goes, I don't want to work with her. I don't want to, you know, she's a girl. And I'm like, hold on a second.
He was that explicit about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, hold on a second. You know, I'm a police officer.
Yeah.
I'm not a girl. I'm a police officer. And so I said, okay, fine. I'll take that. Put it in my back pocket. And I'll show you.
Yeah.
And within, you know, a month or so, he was asking to work with me. He wanted to work with me because we had fun.
Yeah.
We would go and do what we were supposed to do, and I was confident.
Yeah. Did you find that doors opened fairly easily for you, or were you having to prove yourself or work harder every step of the way?
Every step of the way. Yeah. As time goes on, you know, we women are rising to the top because we are as confident as our male partners.
So over the course of your career, Leah, as a woman in a position of authority, have you ever experienced having to really struggle to assert that authority or to find a way of getting what I'm presuming still are largely male officers to respect that authority in you?
I have the knowledge, skills, and ability to command those people, and as a result, you know, they listen to me. When you ask them to do it and you expect a certain level of professionalism, then you get it.
Is it worthwhile for young women to get into policing now?
Absolutely. Follow your heart. If you feel that you want to do this, then this is something that you can do because you are strong and brave. And most women don't understand, like they don't realize that how strong and brave they are. And if we can make a difference in our community, just a little bit of difference, then we've done something that's great.
Yes.